And you're going to hear a no holds barred conversation between MJ, that's Megan Joe, and Tanya and I today about what it's really like behind the recruitment curtain, what we as recruiters and recruitment leaders think, how you can best connect with us, what to look at for job descriptions. And so let me get started by sharing my screen. Let me know if you guys can see that. Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, wonderful. Slideshow. Beautiful. Okay, I am the CEO and founder of the Best You Career Advantage, and I also started Denver Career Connectors because our goal is to be of service to all of the job seekers out there that are looking for positions, that feel paralyzed, lost, or completely disconnected because old strategies that used to work are no longer working in this disruptive time where everything is changing. I also speak, and I've worked with Lockheed, Comcast, and Sonora Quest Laboratories. Today, we also have Megan Jo Specht, who is a senior talent acquisition specialist and has been working in recruitment for over 15 years. For the last 6 years, she's been focused on technical recruiting and currently works for AWS. I've spoken with her and seen her posts on LinkedIn. She is very passionate about the candidate experience, and we all know how difficult it is to look for a position. And so I'm so honored to have her with us today. We also have Tanya Sloven, who is the Director of Business Recruiting and Operations for Ibotta, one of the top technology companies in Denver. Tanya graduated from the U of A, go Wildcats, and moved to San Francisco to work with Service Source. She started in sales, and she soon realized that her passion and drive really was around human resources. In 2016, Tanya joined Ibotta, and she leads business recruiting and manages operations and the recruiting function for Ibotta. So everyone say welcome to Tanya and MJ. Our first question is going to be, we're going to be talking about what is the market really like right now. But before we jump into that, I just want to let you know that Yvette Bell will be monitoring the chat room for your questions. And we're going to be taking general questions throughout the conversation. Very specific questions that deal with just your interviewing or you. We have a very large group today, over 40 people on the call. So we're going to keep it general for you. So please put any questions that you might have into the chat, and Yvette will let us know, and she will be monitoring that. So I'd love to start with our first question. What's the market really like right now? MJ, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I would say that the market right now is in a recovering mode. It's obviously picked back up from a year ago when COVID originally hit. And there are a lot of candidates who are in the market who fit into a number of different kinds of buckets. Maybe for the last year, you've been really wanting to make a professional change, but you were nervous to do it during the COVID pandemic. And so you're finally feeling like the world is kind of back on track and you're ready to get back out there. There are people who had to take off or take a pause from their career to do things like stay home with children, do remote learning, things of that nature. And so they are now back in the market as schools have opened up. There are a lot of different kinds of people who fit in different buckets, but essentially there are a lot of candidates that are currently making a move. And employers, while openings are on the rise and people are hiring again, there is definitely more candidates than job openings. And so it's really important right now to make sure that how you are showing up is authentic and quality, so that when a recruiter does have an opportunity to kind of take notice of your application, you're going to stand out amongst the sea of resumes that they're used to seeing on a daily basis.
Thank you, MJ. So how about you, Tanya? What are your thoughts on the market and what are you seeing at Ibotta?
Yeah, absolutely agree with MJ. While she and I work for very different sized companies, certainly seeing some similarities, it has picked up significantly. So we went from having 0 jobs open at one point to now we've got over 50 jobs posted on our career page. And that has been pretty consistent over the last few months. And some of them are new roles. So some of them are based on new niche skill sets that really align with us fulfilling our mission and pivoting in some different arenas to help grow the business. So for example, I'm not sure how many of you know much about Ibotta, but pre-COVID, we didn't offer cash back on online grocery and delivery. And since COVID, we were really able to truly meet the customer, the savers, the consumers where they are. And so there's certain initiatives happening left and right that require niche skill sets. And so we're seeing some similar trends to what MJ mentioned as well. So lots of candidates, definitely not enough candidates for all of our jobs, or not enough jobs for all of our candidates rather. So it's still a relatively tight market, but tons of opportunities are opening, not just at Ibotta, but I'm noticing around the Denver area and beyond, especially as we move to some roles with the ability to work fully remote, which wasn't a thing a few months ago.
Thank you.
I just kind of want to piggyback on what Tanya said, in that there are some really interesting trends in new kinds of positions because of new initiatives that are a result directly of COVID. And so looking for job applicants who have really niche skill sets or have worked with certain kinds of technologies, there are a lot of things that are exponentially booming and have created brand new industries because of the pandemic. And so that's an interesting thing to hire for as well, because very few people have these skill sets, because these are things that didn't exist a year ago.
Thank you. As a career coach, I see a lot of my clients really focusing on how do I get the attention of recruiters. And when we were preparing for this, MJ, do you want to just talk about how many in-mails and kind of what your volume looks like today? And Tanya, you can follow with just some ideas of that for your team as well.
So I actually had to disable a couple of things on my LinkedIn profile where people can no longer send me an in-mail or a connection request if they don't have my direct email address. And the only way that you would have my direct email address is if you asked me for it or if you knew me previously. And I had to do that because I was receiving hundreds of requests and in-mails every single day. And one of the things is so many of them didn't pertain to me, and people weren't doing their research as far as reaching out to the right people. I don't necessarily know that that could have been prevented. One of the tricky things about working for a company that's so large, like Amazon and Amazon Web Services, is that we have tens of thousands of recruiters who work for different teams and different verticals. And so somebody might be reaching out to me and saying, I'm a marketing professional. I saw XYZ requisition on the website. I would really like to discuss this role with you, but I'm not working on that position. And our teams are so big, I don't even know the direction to point you in. And it became so exhaustive. I was spending 5 or 6 hours a day just responding to in-mails and just responding to connection requests. I had to disable it. And so anytime a market has an overflux of candidates and not enough jobs, that is something that is a reality. But I think what I will tell you is, as much as I desperately want to be able to respond to everybody, there just isn't enough time in the day. And so I did have to turn some of those things off on my profile.
Tanya, how are you feeling and how are your team feeling about that in mail?
Yeah, so my best advice there, I would take the double approach, right? So reaching out and trying to tailor to the right person on the team is absolutely fine, but make sure that you've applied for the position as well, because that then allows the recruiter to avoid a lot of the back and forth by saying, okay, I've looked at your profile. Have you gone and applied? I don't see you in the system. Is it under a different name? And then at that point, just given everything the recruiter has on their plate, they may not then get you the thorough response that you're looking for. And so my recommendation is apply for one or two roles that look to be the best fit, the most interesting to you. And then it's completely okay to reach out to someone on the recruiting team, but try to do your due diligence and look to see. You'll see on my profile, it says business recruiting. So that means if you're looking for a technology role, again, our team is small enough, it's not like Amazon. And so I can definitely direct you to the right person, but it would be better if you then reached out to my counterparts on the tech team. So making sure that you're doing some of that research as well. And we do try to get responses to all of our inbounds, but that can be really challenging, right? I mean, MJ, you say 5 to 6 hours a day. My goodness, that is something else, and really admirable that you even spent that many hours at one point in time, because it can definitely feel really, really overwhelming. So best advice is apply to the job. Don't apply to 10 or 15 jobs. Make sure you're tailoring your job search, and then follow up with a recruiter on the team. Try to best tailor it to the appropriate recruiter on the team. But again, in our situation, we're small enough that I can point you in the right direction if you didn't reach out to the right recruiter.
That's fantastic. So just for our audience, just to recap, make sure that you're being authentic, that you are tailoring your job search, and realize that the recruiters are your business partners, but they are inundated in this saturated market. And for Ibotta, it sounds like approaching them is no problem, but for AWS or big companies, just realize who your audience is. And I will tell you, so many of my clients are interviewing right now. Several of them had interviews last week, and really the market is improving right now. But just understand that the recruiters are your business partner, but they are absolutely saturated at this point. Let's move on to the next question. Tanya, this one goes for you. What types of resumes? Let's talk a little bit about resumes and even cover letters. We had a question from Carla on cover letters. There's so many different types of cover letters and resumes. What do you believe is the best type, and what gets your attention the most?
Yep. So for me personally, again, every recruiter and every company is going to be a little bit different. So speaking on behalf of myself, for me, the easiest to read resumes are going to catch my attention, right? So very clearly formatted, not some funky template where, the formatting of the dates look funny, or everything is to the middle of the page, something that is just really, really appealing to the eyes, that the appropriate companies and years of employment are either bolded or really easy to follow. I find sometimes, if you list, one company that you've worked at multiple times, if I'm going through it really quickly, I have to stop and go, oh, wait, they've actually worked at the same company. They've just had 3 or 4 different roles. Make sure you include a bigger font for the entire company so I can see your track record of achievement at that company, which is going to look really, really impressive, versus when it first catches my eye, I'm seeing that it looks like maybe 4 different jobs and that you only spent 6 to 8 months in each role. So making sure that chronologically everything makes sense, and that it's just easy to read. Now, one of the exceptions might be for a graphic design role or some other creative marketing roles where I can understand why you might put a little bit more pizzazz into the resume, and some creativity is completely good. But for most of the roles, we're looking for standard, clear, easy to read, and really highlights your accomplishments and really shows your track record of achievement. As far as cover letters go, honestly, I'm a little bit indifferent. If you've got a really great resume and it's very applicable for the role that you're applying for, I'm less inclined to say, I really want to see a cover letter. Where a cover letter is super helpful is if you're looking to change industries, you're looking to go into something different than what you've done in the past, or before this remote environment, you don't have anything listed on your resume about relocating to Denver. A cover letter would be helpful to give me that information, so I don't have to wonder whether you're planning to relocate or whether you're looking to change industry. So that to me is when a cover letter is really helpful. Every once in a while, I work with hiring managers who want to see a cover letter regardless. I really think it just sort of depends on how closely you believe your experience matches. And if your resume is great, you're probably going to get a call. If the cover letter piece is optional. Now, if it's required, then yes, submit a cover letter. But if it's optional, I think you can treat that as optional. It doesn't hurt to have it there. I just wouldn't spend a ton of time crafting a cover letter. I'd spend more time making sure that your resume looks great.
I definitely agree with you, Tanya. Resumes need to be very focused to show who your brand is, your authentic self. So putting a few adjectives in there that really represent who you are. Metrics is huge. It should not sound like a job description. It should sound like a story of the outcomes that you have given and driven. And you have to think about each word of it. And so many times I work with people that are like, why do I have to change my resume for different positions I apply to? One of the questions on the chat was, what are the tips and tricks of getting through an ATS? One of the tips is that you align and make a resume. You use a master resume, but then at the top, you actually put the job description or the title of the job description that you're applying to. And then you look for keywords in the job description that you have under core competencies or bulleted out. The more keywords that you have in your resume, the higher you're going to be ranked in the keywords through the artificial intelligence of the applicant tracking system. MJ, would you agree with that?
I would. And even as you're saving it with those subjects, I mean, that's how we open it, right? So we see that you have specifically saved this for a cloud engineer or whatever. Having a master and then going in and tweaking it is personally what I do. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. MJ just put her connection information out there on LinkedIn if you would like to connect with her. Tanya, if you would like to connect with people, would you mind putting yours in the chat as well? So cover letters, if they are required, absolutely make them aligned with what the job is asking for. I actually do a table, and I see MJ shaking her head. Position requirements, how your skill set meets the exact needs of the position. Lots of keywords here. I love how Tanya stated that if you are relocating into the Denver area, or if you're going from California to Florida, wherever you might be, make sure you put that in your cover letter as well. Let's move on to the next question. Hopefully that went through cover letters. And this one would be for MJ. I don't know how to get my application noticed by recruiters. I have applied to lots of jobs, but I never hear back. MJ, what are your thoughts on that?
So I don't typically work with a large number of candidates that apply to jobs. A lot of my candidates that I come into contact with are passive candidates that I actually reach out to on LinkedIn. And so if you are applying to lots of jobs and you are not hearing back, it's very possible that the recruiter for those types of positions are doing that same thing. And so you have to keep in mind a couple of things. A lot of organizations have job titles that don't necessarily make a ton of sense for the types of position that they are. For example, at AWS, I hire a role that's called Technical Account Manager. It's a very, very senior level cloud engineer. that requires 10 years of hands-on enterprise architecture experience. And so if somebody read the job title but did not read through the job description and applied, they are, coming to me and they are saying, why am I not hearing back? I'm sending my application into the black abyss, and they aren't qualified for these roles. It's very clear to me that they didn't read through the job description or the basic qualifications or the preferred qualifications. My biggest tip of advice in this is quality over quantity. You should not ever be applying to hundreds or more jobs in one particular search for a new role. If you are applying for more than 100 jobs at any given time, you're not really paying attention to quality. And so the things that are really important are to tailor your resume for each position that you are applying for, just like what we're talking about. Make sure that it's very clear that your resume is for this position, that you have given it thought, have it saved as a certain title. And then for truly almost any other company other than Amazon, it's really helpful to find out who the appropriate recruiter for that position might be on LinkedIn, and then reach out to them and say, Tanya, I've recently applied to requisition number X, Y, and Z. The email address that I used to apply is this. Here is also a copy of my resume that is enclosed in this email. If you would please take a look, that's really helpful. And I'm looking at here in the chat, the minimum qualification sometimes seems higher than what is required for a job. So I think that it depends on the employer. Amazon is an OFCCP compliant employer, and that means it is illegal for us to hire any person who does not meet every single one of our basic qualifications. And so we have an entire team that goes through every single job posting and scrubs every job description to make sure that the minimum or the basic qualifications are appropriate for the position that we're actually hiring. And so sometimes you might think that the minimum qualifications are egregious for the type of position it is, or maybe you're not actually reading through that job description and figuring out what that role really is. Again, and I'm going to go back to what I recruit for, the position that I hire for, the title is technical account manager. That doesn't seem like the minimum qualification should be 10 years of hands-on enterprise architecture experience. But if you read through that job description, you'll see that that's appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's awesome. We have a couple questions coming in that I'd love to get Tanya or MJ's. The minimum quals seem higher than what's required, i.e. entry level asking for 3+ years of experience. How seriously should we consider these types of qualifications?
Yeah, I think kind of similar to what MJ referenced, but also I would add that years of experience are really just a range. What I've started to do on my job descriptions is I'll say, 1 to 3+, 1 to 2+. Some of the jobs will actually say 0 to 2+, so that if you are right out of school, that is certainly a role, that you can be qualified for. But I think even just saying 1+, 1 to 2+ indicates that even some of the experience that you've gained in school can still count towards it, right? Even if it's not super applicable. And that's one of the big takeaways that I hope you'll take from today, which is work experience is work experience. And if you put yourself through school working at Jimmy John's making sandwiches, that's valuable. Put that on your resume. That counts as experience. Maybe it's not an exact match for a data science role or an account manager role, but all of that we believe really kind of builds your professional toolkit. And so don't sell yourself short. Make sure you're really highlighting on your resume and in the interview process what skills you've gained from jobs such as those that don't seem to be an obvious match.
Especially if it genuinely is an entry-level position and they are asking for 2 or 3+ years of experience, what they're trying to get at is, do you understand how to be at work on time? Do you understand how to work with a team? Do you understand how to, take responsibility for your actions? And those are things that you can learn in jobs that might not be readily applicable, in babysitting, in working at Jimmy John's, in being a bartender, things of that nature. So just, I would pay very close attention to when they say minimum qualifications. If one of your problems is that you are applying to hundreds of jobs and you're not hearing back, it might be that you aren't paying attention to that and they're serious about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have some other questions. One of the questions that has come up quite often is, I haven't had to interview for 5 years and I'm scared that I don't know what the process is. Most interviews are based on behavioral-based interviewing, and it can be called the STAR method: situation, task, actions, and results. There's areas that it might call PAR, problem, action, and result. The point is that I highly recommend that you put together an Excel spreadsheet that has answers that you think through and practice what you're going to say when you're asked different interview questions. As soon as you hit submit to the ATS, this is when your brand is starting to be built with the companies that you're applying to. If you get a call from a coordinator, that coordinator is going to have input as to your hire. They're going to let the recruiters know if you have been one of the classiest, most professional, most emotionally connected. Make sure that you're treating every single person with whom you are interacting with the utmost respect, that you're sending thank you letters. Ask the coordinator or the recruiter or the human resources generalist, help me understand who I'm going to be interviewing with. What is the process? If it's a panel interview, make sure that you understand who you're going to be talking with. You can do some due diligence, not stalking, on LinkedIn. And your job is to make sure that before that interview, that you know yourself. And what do I mean when I say know yourself? Know your resume, because that is the piece that the hiring leader and that the recruiter are looking at. If they ask you a question based on your resume, make sure that you have a written down situation, action, and result to answer those questions. So you have to know yourself, you have to know the company, and do your due diligence on the department, the people that you're interviewing with. The biggest piece of advice I give to my clients is try to find their pain points or their growth points so that you can spin the conversation to get information out of the interview so that you can tee up and amplify your answers to match exactly what the hiring leaders and the recruiters are looking for when they say, what are the biggest challenges? Or what are the main obstacles that you are having right now? MJ or Tanya, what are your thoughts? Hello? Okay.
Nothing really specific to add to that. I'm just looking at the questions that came through in the chat. Yeah, look, I mean, if they're asking for 10 years of experience and you have 15, absolutely you should apply. I really want to make sure that message, is driven home, that years of experience are really just a range. And if you're a little bit shy or a little bit over, that is okay. It's not a perfect science when we are creating these job descriptions. We try to get as close as possible, but there are going to be a number of different variables that go into whether a candidate is qualified for the role.
MJ, any thoughts from you?
It also depends on the industry as far as, I mean, I haven't seen a job posting in a very long time that has asked for more than 10 years of experience in anything, because there are very few fields where 10 years ago, whatever you were doing is relevant today. So, especially in technology, whatever you were doing 10 years ago is not important because the technology won't be the same. The marketing concepts that were true more than 10 years ago are no longer being utilized. I mean, even bookkeeping, auditing, accounting. I mean, there you shouldn't be coming across jobs that are asking for more than 10 years of professional experience anyway. As a general rule of thumb, I myself only put 10 years of experience on my resume because my general feeling is that anything that you were doing more than 10 years ago isn't applicable. So you shouldn't be running into that very often where they're asking for 15 or 20 years of experience in something particular, because then that also can creep into ageism and things of that nature. I think that's a different kind of bucket, if that makes sense. In regards to going back to the original question about interviewing, and I didn't mean to kind of sidetrack us, I'm sorry about that. Interviewing is a skill. And one of the biggest things that I hear from people who are new to looking for a job, or are a new grad, or have been with the same company for 10 years and they want to change companies, the biggest thing is fear. I have not interviewed in so long, I am not going to be good at it. And my suggestion to you is, just like any other muscle, to practice. The spreadsheet that Shell mentioned is incredibly helpful. You should write down cue cards. Behavioral questions that employees ask or employers ask, almost regardless of the industry, are very similar. You should be Googling the 25 most common interview questions, and then you should find a friend, find a colleague, find a family member who will sit down and practice those with you. Because if you practice, you're going to feel more comfortable. I myself have a personal rule that I am always interviewing. I am always taking phone calls from recruiters. It helps me to keep those skills sharp, but it also helps me to understand what's happening in the market. What is my skill set worth right now? Those kinds of things. And so if you haven't interviewed in 5 years, regardless of whether or not you are actively or passively seeking a new role, that's something that you need to be doing and you need to be practicing, because it is not the time to figure out that you are bad at interviewing during an interview for your dream job.
MJ, that advice is so true. I have so many stories of when people bombed it, and then they come to me as a career coach and say, I don't know how to do this. So talk to your teddy bear is what I say. Find someone to practice with and know your branding statement of who you are. What are you passionate about? What drives you? What are you known for? And then what is your sweet spot? Because when you're networking, you're still interviewing. Networking and interviewing is, for example, if you were to talk to Tanya or talk with me, they're still assessing you on how you're approaching them in networking. So that's actually part of the interview process from my perspective. Okay, we're getting some questions on boot camps, and I will take this question, and MJ or Tanya, if you want to chime in.
I can take a stab. So given that I'm on the business side, I'm not as close to it, but we certainly do value the relationships that we have formed with some boot camps in the area. And we have definitely hired engineers directly out of boot camp. So I think if you take all of the advice that you're hearing here today, know that part of the interview process will likely be a technical exercise as well. So as long as the skills that you've learned at boot camp meet the minimum requirements for the role, you're absolutely, very likely in a good spot to be able to get a great role out of boot camp. But again, I'm not as skilled on the tech side. So MJ, I'm not sure if you have any additional info to share.
So there are a lot of companies that take boot camp grads, and there are a lot of companies that don't. And typically a company will have a stance on it one way or the other. And you can Google that. Does this company accept boot camp grads? Does this not? And typically the types of companies that do that are medium-sized businesses who have large engineering departments, and they have enough engineers. They have been in business for long enough where they have strong onboarding programs. So they typically will pair you with a very strong developer and will do paired programming for your first year. That's a great way to learn. The types of companies who do not do that are typically very small companies that have smaller engineering departments because they don't have the bandwidth to do that, and very large companies, because typically in very large companies, developers are given a lot more autonomy, and that's not a good environment for onboarding. So I would look at companies like Dish, Comcast, Excel, Level 3 Communications, Maxar Technologies, those really kind of medium-sized businesses that have been in business for decades, that have had the opportunity to ramp up their onboarding programs and are comfortable doing that. If you go and work at one of those companies for 2 years, you can move on and go anywhere from that, but you need to get that first 2 years of that enterprise level experience. And then you can decide, do you want to go work for a smaller company or a larger company, but you'll have a lot more freedom. And again, that information is really public and it's really easy to find. Does Dish Network take on boot camp developers, product managers, project managers? I mean, there's boot camps for all kinds of things. And those medium-sized businesses are typically the ones that have the ability to take that on.
Thank you. I know companies like Flowify and Quantum Metrics also do take on boot camp. I ran university talent for Lockheed, so I'm happy to kind of jump in on at another time. We've got lots of other questions coming in. Now, the next question we have on the presentation, Tanya, how should candidates appropriately and effectively communicate their value prop and align with key criteria for the role?
Yeah, so this is something we touched on briefly, but it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. Whether it's the STAR method or the CAR method, being really specific is really important. And so oftentimes what I encourage my recruiters to do is to really set the stage for the candidate and let them know that the next few questions we're going to be asking, we're looking for specific examples. But in the event that a recruiter forgets to mention that, or that's just not part of their flow, know that all recruiters, at least all the recruiters that I know, are looking for really specific examples, because behavioral-based interviewing allows us to determine whether what someone has done in the past will translate well to the role that they're applying to land in the future or the near term. And so if we ask you, tell me about a time when you received some constructive feedback and how did you handle it? And you respond with, oh, I always have a positive attitude. I'm a team player. I take feedback well. That's a great sentiment, and you should absolutely share that with the recruiter or with the hiring manager. But give me an exact instance when that occurred. So I always tell candidates, stay away from sometimes, usually, and always. Really paint me a picture so that I can determine whether what you've done will translate well to this role. And so being able to Shelley's point, to have a list of stories for behavioral-based questions that you can readily answer in any type of interview format is highly, highly recommended. And then similarly, at least at Ibotta, for most roles, there's typically going to be a project as part of the interview process as well. So whether that's on the fly or a take-home project that allows us to further dig deep into your skills. We are by no means expecting candidates to pull all-nighters or spend a whole bunch of time prepping for the interview, but we at least want candidates to spend some time familiarizing themselves with the prompt, and whether it's putting some slides together, or in the case of engineering, it's a pairing exercise. That is a really good way to be able to showcase your skills alongside the behavioral-based interview questions that you're going to get throughout the entire process. So starting with the recruiter to the hiring manager, to any panel interviews, to one-on-ones, being really, really specific is important. And then going back to my prior point, it doesn't matter what type of experience you have, be proud of the work that you've done. And as long as you can give specific examples about, the great teamwork, communication skills, problem solving ability that you garnered while working at Jimmy John's, that's really, really valuable. I mentioned Jimmy John's because I like Jimmy John's and they're all over town. They're on college campuses. So I like to use Jimmy John's as an example, but that's valuable experience, and don't shy away from sharing those experiences. Now, if you worked at Jimmy John's 10 years ago and all of your more recent experience is more relevant and you're only sharing examples from Jimmy John's, then I'm going to question why you're not sharing more recent stories that are more relevant to the role that you're applying for.
One of the things that I love to make sure people do is, what is your value story? What is the value that you can bring to the employer? And what I mean by value story is, how have you provided solutions to similar obstacles that the company has had? What is your value story? And then what's your values story? How do your values align with those of the company? And I see MJ shaking her head. So Amazon has these leadership principles. And I know that the candidates and clients that I work with that try to get into Amazon, you have to be able to answer very specific details on leadership principles, which are the values. So your value proposition has to align with the vision, the values, and you have to be able to tell a story, a specific story in the STAR format of how you have helped to grow the company, solve problems, maintain large projects. That is what's going to best help you effectively be a candidate where MJ or Tanya would remember. And I see MJ shaking her head on that. So we could go a lot into the principles for Amazon. We could probably do a whole webinar just on that. But let's jump to our next question. And this is where MJ is a LinkedIn authority and strategist. MJ, can you take our audience through what are the secrets of using LinkedIn to get noticed by recruiters?
So the first thing that you need to understand about LinkedIn is that it is a free platform only for everyday humans. It is only a free platform for candidates. So the customers of LinkedIn are recruiters. It is a free platform, but generating LinkedIn is not free. And so as a recruiter, I pay over $10,000 a year to be able to have a recruiter license. And what that means is that as far as LinkedIn is concerned, I am their customer and they want to continue to make me happy. And so everything that LinkedIn does is based on an algorithm. And so, like I said earlier, a large majority of my candidates that I work with are actually candidates who are passive that I found on LinkedIn and that I reached out to. And so when I go in on the recruiter side and I am creating a search for a certain type of candidates, let's say that the search yields 1,000 profiles. Every single profile that comes up on that search matches the search equally. There is no greater or lesser. There is no, black all the way to gray. You either match that search or you don't. But LinkedIn is going to decide who I see first, right? And so if 1,000 people came up, I'm going to have 10 pages of profiles that I need to look through. And so because LinkedIn wants to keep me happy because I'm their paying customer, they're going to use these algorithms to decide who they show me first. And it's things like how active is a candidate on LinkedIn? So when recruiters reach out to them, do they respond? Have they recently gone in and updated their resume? Do they believe that their LinkedIn profile is up to date? Are they constantly updating their skills? Are they active? Do they write posts, comment on other people's posts, like things, share things, etc.? Because somebody who is active on LinkedIn and is responding to recruiter emails, regardless of whether or not they are interested, those are the types of people that LinkedIn is going to have me see first, because I'm going to be more likely to get a response from them. And so the reason that's really important is that you need to remember that. And so as people are reaching out to you on LinkedIn, even if you are completely not interested, it's really important to boost your own algorithm to respond and to say, thank you so much for reaching out to me. This does look like a great opportunity, but it's not something I'm interested in right at this moment. I'd love to stay in touch. It's important to go in and update your profile. It's important to make sure that your skills assessment is constantly updated. I actually have a reminder on my calendar for every 6 months to go in and update my skills section. Are my skills accurate? If this says Word, but I haven't worked in Word in 2 years, it's time to remove that, right? I'm going through and I'm making sure that my employment is updated, that I have bullet points, that it's robust and it's completely filled out. Those are the types of people that are going to come into my search first. So if I have 1,000 candidates, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to be able to, in one sitting, get to every 1,000. I'm maybe going to go through the first 100, and then I'm going to lose focus and get up and do something else. And those other 900 profiles will never make it into my purview. So you need to remember who LinkedIn's customer is, why they want to keep them happy, and then how they assess profiles in doing that. I highly recommend that you put a reminder on your own calendar for every 6 months to go in, look at your LinkedIn profile, assess your skills, make sure that that's still accurate information. Sometimes as a recruiter, I will just do a skills search. I'm just looking for people who put that they are skilled in Linux or virtualization or storage. And so making sure that that's up to date, making sure that your employment is up to date, make sure that you are asking people for recommendations, that you are providing recommendations. The other thing that I'm going to tell you is that this really goes back to your own personal brand. This is not the time to have things that you wouldn't be comfortable with your boss or your mother seeing. And so you need to be really cognizant and know that I can see when you interact on somebody's posts, if you are using racial or sexist remarks. I have the ability to see that. This is the opportunity to have a professional picture. This is not the time to have a selfie. This is not the time to have a picture of you in a bar where you've cropped out 5 other people. It's not a time for you to have multiple people in your profile picture, because then I'm playing a guessing game. Which one is Tanya, right? And so it's very important to have a professional picture, to make sure that your behavior on LinkedIn is appropriate, and to make sure that you are constantly engaging so that that algorithm is going to boost your likelihood of actually getting in front of me. Does that make sense? Does that answer that, Shell?
That's awesome. Thanks, MJ. So I just put some things in the chat. Make sure you have a professional picture. Your headline, your recommendations, your skills and endorsements are vital. And don't make us guess. Be clear and strategic with your messaging. Another pro tip is in your About Me section, put your phone number and your email address in there, because a lot of times on mobile devices or recruiters will not have that in your contact, or they can't see it. Put it in your About Me section. Okay, lots of other questions coming in. Tanya, there was one on, do you have any advice for our audience on the best way to handle career gaps?
Yeah. Again, I know I'm going to keep going back to specific examples, but career gaps are okay. And quite honestly, while I will ask questions around, oh, help me understand why you left this job, what prompted your move to leave that company to go on to the next, I'm typically not going to dig into your personal life. In fact, I'm definitely not going to be digging into your personal life to find out why you may have a 3-year gap, a 5-year gap. Again, I think as long as you can relate what you have done most recently to what the job entails. So kind of to our earlier points, pulling nuggets from the job descriptions, looking at the company career page, looking at the values, looking at the mission statement, looking at what some of the company goals are, and trying to relate how what you've done both in your professional life recently and less recently, and how they apply. I think that that's okay. Again, I think especially in today's day and age, career gaps are going to become more common, especially when you think about the pandemic year that we have had. I think, can't remember if Shelley or MJ said, there are a lot of people returning to the workforce now with a year gap on their resume. And there may be plenty of other reasons why people take time off. So
there's different opinions on that as well. So Tanya, that was awesome. Thank you. And I put just out to everyone. Recruiters will ask questions. Just make sure your answers are clear, concise, and focus on what you've done most recently. If it's a big career gap, some of my clients actually put cared for family, can't wait to get back. It's really about your current and transferable skills and knowledge that recruiters are going to be looking for. We're doing pretty good tight on time.
Sorry to quickly interrupt, I just want to quickly mention, given LinkedIn and other platforms offer so many free courses right now, if you did take free courses or paid courses, whatever the case may be, to stay current, then that would be super appropriate to list that on your LinkedIn profile or on your resume, and to talk about that as an example, right? Maybe your behavioral-based interview answer is about a webinar that you listened to, a certification that you got. So all of that is definitely relevant. So don't sell yourself short.
Awesome. Our last question that we have prepared for you is about compensation. And we know that this is an absolute point of anxiety. And so we want to talk to you about, how do you talk to recruiters about compensation? Or what do you do at the offer stage? Can you negotiate? And what is the best strategy? So I'd love to get MJ and Tanya's opinion on this, but I always tell my clients that it's like a dance, that you never want to be the first one to talk about your salary, especially early in the process, and that you should definitely look at salary.com or market salary assessments to know what your job entails, or to know what your range of pay and your rate of pay should be. So it might go something like this. The recruiter might say, tell me about, or what are your salary expectations? And MJ and Tanya, I believe that January 1st, 2021, there's a new law that Colorado has to state what the range is. So this is from an equity perspective. Do your homework on what you're worth and be willing to talk about what you're worth in a confident manner. So MJ, what are your thoughts on this, and what advice do you have from AWS's perspective?
So a couple of things. I think it's really important to do some research online. I also think it's really important to talk to people. And I know this is awkward and uncomfortable, but I think it's really important to find other people that are currently in a similar role with similar years of experience and ask them, what are you making? The largest pay disparities are between, people who work in the same company and don't have any idea what other people are making. And so I think that it's important to ask your community, what does somebody with my skill set in this city make? Salary.com, Glassdoor.com, things of that nature. I think you need to get comfortable with the number that you have. And I think that you need to say it confidently and then shut up. Do not justify it. Do not say why. So as a recruiter, here's what I'm going to say to you. What are your total comp expectations to make a jump into this role? So you need to have a number in your mind going into that conversation. Let's say it's 180, right? What are your total compensation expectations? 180. Then be quiet. You don't have to tell me why. You don't have to tell me what makes you worthy of that or where you got that number from. I, as a recruiter, am going to respond and I am going to say one of two things. Okay, that is within our range, or okay, that is not within our range. In either example, I'm going to say, here's what our range is. Okay. And then you can decide. So let's say our range is 150 to 179. You're right there, right? So you're going to say, okay, I think it would still be worthwhile to continue on in the interview process, as long as, we're playing the same game. I think that people get in trouble when they aren't comfortable talking about it and they have all the stuff that they want to say afterwards. Say your number, be quiet.
I can't agree with you more. So many times it's the dance, but know when to stop your feet. Know when to stop your mouth. I'm looking for a range of this and say it with confidence. That really is what paralyzes people or gets people off track, is they're not comfortable talking about their worth. And so Tanya and MJ and I absolutely want you to be comfortable talking about your worth. We're coming up on time right now. I am more than comfortable to stay on, but I do want to let you know that for those of you that have to jump off, Denver Career Connectors does meet twice a month, and our next conversation is going to be on career resilience and mental fitness and purpose for the journey. Because so many times when you're in this spiral of I'm not good enough, that inner critic is messing with you. And we want to help you feel more confident. I also have free webinars coming up this week that I would love to invite all of you to join. You can find it on my website under the events area. I'm going to talk about networking. It's going to be on Thursday from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. And then I'm going to go into how do you amplify, intensify, and boost your awesome to get attention. What is the Sunday night problem? How do you get the attention of others? So Yvette, please put in my website where they can sign up for events. And we'd also love to see you back on Career Connectors in just a few weeks. If you do visit my webpage, you can get a free tips on networking and how to approach people. It is now 1 o'clock. MJ or Tanya, I'm not sure if you can stay on to answer some final questions, but what a session. Thank you both to Tanya and to MJ for really helping us to understand what is the story behind the recruitment curtain. I'm seeing a lot of people jump on chat. Let's see what we have coming up. MJ, are you okay to stay on?
I actually do need to drop.
Okay. Thank you
This was
so
wonderful.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. Tanya, how about you? Can you stay on, or you?
I can stay on for a few.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any burning platform questions that we did not answer? Yvette, if you're seeing anything in the chat, let me know.
I had a couple that I jotted down. There was one question I actually am personally interested in hearing the answer to this. If it was Benjamin, he mentioned that he gets notices from LinkedIn telling him that he is a top candidate, and wanted to know if recruiters are also getting notifications that says he's also a top candidate, or if that's, he called it window dressing.
So meaning getting them from partner platforms like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, et cetera?
He did not mention that.
Okay.
Is Benjamin still here? Oh, he says from LinkedIn. Yes.
Yeah, I think I don't want to speak specifically about LinkedIn, Glassdoor, or some of the other partner platforms, but sometimes the algorithms, they can be a little bit hit or miss. So I know I have received in the past from certain sites that I'm a fit for roles that are definitely not in my wheelhouse, or to be for a role for the company that I work for. So clearly the algorithm is not taking into account that I'm already at the company. So I think it depends. I think sometimes the algorithms are really great and you should definitely take the time to explore, but I wouldn't say that they're completely foolproof. I would do a little bit more research before making the assumption that it's a good fit.
I agree with Tanya. From a recruitment standpoint, when we go into LinkedIn and we have a LinkedIn recruiter seat, what MJ was talking about at 10,000, that actually can go up as well. But we're doing what are called Boolean searches or keyword searches or Google searches. And we're really looking for what does your skills and endorsements area have? What are the keywords on your LinkedIn? So not only are they important for resumes, but they are vital that you have the right keywords that align with what alerts you're getting on LinkedIn. So the good news is, Benjamin, that you're looking for, or that you're getting alerts on jobs. It might be a little bit different in the recruiter seat because we're controlling the keywords that we're leveraging in order to find you. Okay, we've got some questions coming up on interviewing and highlights, and we will be sending out a recording of this along with, it's going to be in a newsletter, the direct links where you can sign up to some of my free webinars. And I believe MJ gave her LinkedIn information and Tanya did as well. So Kate B is asking for, what is a recruiter specifically looking for when they tell me about yourself question? So
yeah.
Tanya, what do you look for?
I was gonna say, that's why I wrote, I'm looking for career highlights, because, and I try to actually tailor my question to ask that. So I'll say, you know, what are 1 or 2 professional accomplishments that you're most proud of? Or when you think about your legacy at X company, you were there for 5 or 6 years, what do you hang your hat on? What are you most proud of? Because tell me about yourself. I agree, it's really, really broad. And as a job seeker, I can see why that would be really confusing. So I would stick to career highlights. This has been my path to success. This is what I've achieved, and providing just as much detail without spending half an hour going through your resume. Make sure you're sort of sticking to the facts, because then the recruiter will likely be doing a deeper dive into the specific example portion of the interview.
My insight on that would also be, the way I got my job at Lockheed Martin is, what are your accomplishments? What are you known for? What are you driven by? And what is your sweet spot? Like, I am known for being a diversity champion, being a great alignment with my clients, or really understanding people's values. Make sure you know what you're really good at. All right, I'm going to close out the session, and thank you all again for coming to Denver Career Connectors. Help us get the word out. Tell your friends, people in your boot camps about us. We are free, and we're here to really help you. I'll be your best. Have an amazing week, and thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Shelley. Thanks everyone for joining. Great to meet you all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.